Good afternoon. My name is Isiaih McKnight, and to present this thesis the right way, I need to be vulnerable. I need to be open and honest with you all. So let's go back to where this all began, my childhood. Growing up, I was taught to be strong, to not cry, to push through when times were difficult. It wasn't my dad's fault. It wasn't even his dad's fault. It was society. For many centuries, society had the mindset that men must appear stronger and stoic. I'll admit, I believe what society said and would try to live up to that lifestyle. Living an emotionless life was the result of this. It made me believe that if I showed emotion, I would look weak and frail. But I'm here today to tell you all that that concept of how men should act is completely wrong. I know I'm not the only one who has struggled with this. Mental health in recent years has become significantly more and more involved, rightfully so, in the discussions and talks about health and wellness. Many can now spot and recognize signs of poor mental health and suicidal ideation, and know what to do when faced with these traits. Yet men's mental health is still not talked about as much as mental health's well-being in general. Men are often overlooked when it comes to a conversation about prompting resources like therapy or campaigns to improve our well-being. Before we take this any further, let me make it clear which range of men I am addressing. Boys from a young age, approximately around age 10, get taught to be a man and already have that mindset. So when referring to men's mental health, the age range I will be covering is ages 10 to 50. We can all agree that mental health is a very important issue in today's society. However, on behalf of the topic of men's mental health, some disagree and say men's mental health does have enough support and that society does care about it, even saying that men do go out of their way to get help and treatment. All of these points are far from the truth as it relates to men's mental health. I believe that men's mental health is a system that is underlooked compared to other mental health campaigns. It is a system that needs to be redefined. There are many reasons as to why men's mental health has been underlooked and not concerned, but there are 3 specific reasons I would like to look at in this essay. Number 1, vast amounts of this topic's creation has strayed from cultural norms that we have appropriated for men's mental health, with that being self, social, and societal norms that impacted it. Following that, the second point leads into the ways that social media has had major impacts on men's mental health. And finally, a look at society as a whole and how they handled and treated men's mental health. The pressing truth about men and how their mental health is perceived is that it isn't. If anything, it is overlooked and not prioritized. There can be many points argued that go into the fact that men's mental health is overlooked. A pressing one that has been seen a lot throughout history is the stigma that men are pressured to appear stronger and stoic, no matter what hard and struggling areas in their life they might be affected by. There's been a built-up of fear of being perceived as weak, frail, even damaged. This fear, put out by the stigma, has stopped numerous men from seeking professional help. I've taken the liberty of going out and finding men diagnosed with depression who admitted to why they didn't pursue any help. What I found was that they end up avoiding seeking professional help so they don't appear weak. It hasn't just had an effect on help from a professional standpoint, but in also many cases closed off help and support received from family members. In many cases, men have shown different signs of depression and are stranded from the usual sadness and despair. Some men have ended up showing signs of more anger, rage, and aggression, which makes it easier for their loved ones to skip over common signs. Again and again, the stigma has shown tremendous ways of holding men back, and some of it can be seen surrounding the online field of social media. Social media has become an integral part of modern life, offering a platform for connecting, sharing, and staying informed. As of January 2024, there were 5.3 billion internet users worldwide, which amounted to 66.2% of the global population. Of this total, 5.4 billion, or 62.3% of the world's population, were social media users. Every single day, there are tons of resources and information put out into the world. A large percent of it can be harmful, abusive, misleading, resulting in a lot of bad influence. Even though a lot of bad can come from social media, there's also a large percent that does so much good. Social media can provide access to important information and create a space for self-expression, the uniting of communities, and the bringing of change when needed. Since social media can have such a big impact on today's society, what ways and influence can it have on mental health, specifically men's mental health? There are so many unrealistic standards of how men should act, and the output social media has put out has now become social norms of men. Men may feel pressure to meet unrealistic standards of success, physical appearance, and lifestyle, which can negatively affect their self-esteem and mental health. Social media can perpetuate stereotypes of masculinity, prompting an idealized and often unattainable body image. Men may feel the pressure to conform to these standards, leading to body dissatisfaction and the development of body image issues. With all that negativity out there online, educate yourselves on the matter and inform others online across the world. Speaking on the matter of education, one of the biggest and most influential places you can go for education is the Bible, God's holy word. Although the Bible does not specifically speak about men's mental health, it still speaks about a person's emotions, their mind, their soul, and their heart. 1 Kings 19:4 talks about Elijah and the struggles he went through. The journey he ventured on resulted in him sitting down and praying to God to die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." God, however, didn't do that. Instead, he gave Elijah the strength to keep going and provided for Elijah. This and many other examples in the Bible show that in those hard times, God is the key. When our mental state is at an all-time low, turn to God and he will help you. You can always talk and confide in God. What we project and what we let into our minds can be a reflection of ourselves. If we keep taking in social media's negative outlooks and the stigmas and norms that surround society, that will only reflect our character. Don't be easily influenced by what negative information that anonymous user puts out. Society itself has held men back from receiving help and bettering themselves. Not only has it brought forth a stigma, social norms, and unrealistic expectations for men, but it also, in general, just hasn't put out as much effort for men's mental health compared to others. In today's society, men hardly get reached out for their mental well-being. Society isn't just one-sided, though. This issue is not just on one spectrum. Men themselves haven't reached out when it comes to getting help. The more you bottle up your emotions, the more you are likely to explode. All these have played a part in awareness of men's mental health being at an all-time low. There's been little to no work towards breaking down the stereotypes or even building up talks and conversations about men. Speaking up hasn't really happened. Society in itself, in a way, has just been lazy about breaking down these stereotypes. It hasn't just been stereotypes of men, but in general, there has been so much negative put out with stereotyping. The best way to maintain good mental health is to be surrounded by positive things in your life. A first step to helping this worldwide problem among men is to stress the importance of reaching out to others for help, and to make sure they won't get ashamed for it because of recent societal stereotypes. Society as a whole needs to step up if we want change to happen, because at the end of the day, it's all of our problems. Educate yourselves and take initiative. Be the change. Understand the magnitude, depth, concerns, and opinions that get projected out. The magnitude of men's mental health concerns is very much there. However, in contrast, some think that men's mental health is not overlooked, and that if we get more attention and awareness, there could be negative outcomes that come from it. For one, the more attention and awareness that happens with the raising of awareness towards men's mental health can cause more shame than change to happen. Shame is one of the most powerful emotions. For men, it can simply be the fear of not being tough enough, wealthy enough, or even smart enough. The number one trigger that follows with shame for men is that they are perceived as weak. Men have to walk a tightrope where any sign of weakness equates to shame. And so they are afraid to make themselves vulnerable for fear of looking weak. But if you can't be vulnerable, then you can't truly grow and be your best self. Back to the original argument, shame will most likely follow because so much attention will be on them. Instead of an impactful change happening, more shame will be cast on men all around the world and the numbers will spike. With this, equality and fairness is the goal. Eradication of the stigma is the goal. Making men feel free and able to express their hard times and struggles is the goal. Although these are understandable arguments, those concerns don't meet up with the intentions we have when spreading more awareness of men's mental health. In conclusion, I believe that men's mental health is a system that is underlooked compared to other mental health campaigns. The facts and statistics don't lie. There needs to be a change to how society views men's mental health. We cannot keep letting the stigma flood social media in our everyday lives. More and more men will die, and the numbers will never cease. As a man, I acknowledge that social norms often pressure us to maintain a facet of strength in both platonic and romantic relationships, discouraging us from expressing vulnerability or seeking help for mental health issues like depression. However, it is important to understand that seeking support or being open about emotional struggles does not diminish one's masculinity. The prevailing stigma leads to fewer men reporting mental health issues compared to women, perpetrating this misconception that mental health support is more deserved by one gender over the other. This discrepancy highlights the need to challenge social perceptions of masculinity and strength. Cultural and environmental influences play a significant role in shaping men's perceptions of their own masculinity and resilience. The findings presented in this thesis highlight the complexity that follows men and their mental health concerns and issues. Be the change, be the encouragers. Help men's comfortability rise when speaking about mental health concerns. Word to all the men out there, it isn't just on everyone else in the world to help with the situation. A big part of it falls on us as well to go out and get help for ourselves. Ways we can help and better ourselves is 1, by spreading news among men that showing emotion does not equal weakness. 2, finding a support system and community that makes you feel safe and welcomed for expression. And 3, educate yourself on the truth, not the false. This stigma is very real and still prominent. So much harm has come from it, like toxic masculinity, self-destructive behaviors, and many more. This topic is important to society, but even more so to men. Men's mental health not only impacts men, but it can also impact wives, mothers, daughters, sisters, brothers, sons, etc. It is truly an all-around concern. Men are humans too. Love them, support them, and most importantly, listen to the words they don't speak. Thank you.
Great job, Isiaih. We'll now move into our time of questioning. We can start with Officer Reinhardt.
Isiaih, I'd first like to say you did a great job. I don't know if everybody else feels the same way, but I felt your passion with how you presented, that this was an important subject to you. I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but May is also Mental Health Awareness Month, so a great time to be having this subject that we're talking about. Most of what you said was, in my opinion, in my experience over the past 17 years of being in my particular role, my role in law enforcement has really been deeply involved in mental health since I've started. Most of what you said was spot on. I don't really have a lot of arguments with most of what you said, or even debate. But a couple things I thought about, just prompting you, and you kind of covered it, but I wanted to see where you could expand on it a little bit. I'll just give you 2 questions I'll throw out. And you kind of touched on this, so I realize that, but I want to see what more you can give. Is what, as individuals, can we do to break down some of these barriers? That's one question. And then the other thing I thought about, that when I listened, I wasn't sure maybe if everybody knew what you were thinking, or I don't always know what it means. Maybe you can expand on what, in your view, does the term toxic masculinity mean, and could you provide some examples of like self-destructive behaviors that we would really want to avoid?
To answer your second question first, I see toxic masculinity as a man just, in a way, being full of himself, especially around women, and just, in a way, just being toxic, thinking they're the best, and like, oh, men are better than women, and all that. But to allude to the second half of it, I did come across that in my research, and I believe I did state it in my thesis. So, negatives that can come from that, from toxic masculinity, like areas that can...
Or what are some examples of maybe some destructive behaviors that would lead to not having good mental health?
Yeah. Self-harm, anger, and rage is what I highlighted in my thesis. I feel like those three, and there is more, but those three are ones that stood out to me, and I could really connect with, and I could really see it fitting in. And then, sorry, could you repeat your first question?
Yeah, it was just, and you kind of touched on it, but I just wanted to get a little more of your thoughts on, as individuals, so we talk broadly in societal terms, but as individuals, because a lot of these things that we're talking about, it takes individual effort, right? If we each took an effort to break these barriers down, so what are some ways that you could think of that may help to break down a barrier if you have a friend or a brother or a father or someone that's close to you? How would you help as an individual to break down that barrier of feeling a certain type of way about your mental health?
Honestly, for me, I would just talk to them. I've been in that situation before where I've had friends with their mental health. It was really bad, and just talking to them, being there to listen and hear their struggles and problems, helped them and got them through the situation. Sometimes all you need is someone to talk to, and not everyone has that. I highlighted on social media in my thesis, and I alluded to it. Yeah, yes, there are negatives that can come from social media, but I also alluded to a lot of positives that can come from social media. So if you yourself can't help that person, you can direct them towards social media to look up ways that can help them, because although there can be harm and hate, there's still so much good, and there's still so much information that can go, that you can pull from social media to better your mental health.
Yep, and I'll just finish with one last thing. The way I like to live my life and do everything that I do, I always think, and I think this would fit right into that, is always think of treating others the way you would want to be treated. And I think if we do that, even when you're talking about mental health, like how would I feel if I was feeling this way? And if we think about that, it's a lot of times much easier to break down those barriers with someone who's struggling. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Isiaih, I can tell this is an area that is very near and dear to you, and I think you did a wonderful job of sharing from your heart. You mentioned, I just have two questions and two comments. You mentioned a lot about the stereotyping that are placed on men, and I just wanted to see if you could elaborate a little bit on the constraining factors of seeing ourselves as men in the image of God based upon social media. The things in social media that help us or push us away from seeing ourselves in the image of God, that are fostered by social media, like the things that social media may cause us to do to take our eyes away from seeing ourselves in His image. Maybe you want to elaborate on that. That's the first one I have.
So, social media has had a majorly negative impact on the way men can view themselves. As I talked about it talked about physical appearance, ways we carry ourselves, how we act, and how we go about our day-to-day lives. then yeah, it's been negative, but the Bible, so it has been negative, and the Bible doesn't call for it to be what social media has put out there. And so what you can do to best combat this is, as I stated in my thesis, educate yourself. Now, yes, you can educate yourself on social media, but if there is so much negative coming from that and you somehow can't get out of the negative, go to the Bible. Go to the Bible itself.
Amen.
That will give you almost everything you need.
Everything.
Basically, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaiah. And one more other question. Practically speaking, what type of man do you feel, this is practically speaking, that your future wife and children will see and should look for in you, in part based upon what you've learned in your research?
Number one, I think she would be looking for a man of God.
Amen.
But also, so I think she's also looking for a strong man, and I think she's looking for a strong man that, a provider that can care for her, but also a man that can be vulnerable and open about his emotions. Now, I believe that one of the strongest things a man can do is to be able to express himself and share his emotions whenever. To not just be some emotionless person, because that's not, that's not, yeah. Yeah, so that's what I think she's looking for.
Amen.
Thanks, Isaiah. Appreciate all the thought and work you put into this topic. The Department of Veterans Affairs estimates that 22 veterans a day commit suicide, and 90% of veterans are men, so you could say then 20 male veterans a day commit suicide. I wonder if that any of specific to veterans came up in your research, and if not, what kind of correlation you think there is between this negative stigma of mental health and this huge number, more than 1.5 times the average rate of suicide is the suicide rate of veterans. I wonder if you think there's a connection between this kind of negative stigma and maybe the way the military or veterans handle it.
So specifically for veterans, I didn't necessarily come across research about that. I was more focusing on, and they do group into the category, but specifically, yeah, I focused on men as a whole, something across all categories, and specifically for ages 10 to 50. I do believe there is some connection with how the military goes about it, and honestly, it does make sense why those numbers would be so high for that field specifically. Obviously, in the military, they're hard on you, yelling stuff in your face constantly. So I feel like some of the stigma, maybe not all of it, can be cast and seen in the military aspect when veterans, retire.
Thank you. Have you personally experienced or been a part of, and you might not want to admit that part, peer pressure surrounding mental health? Either a temptation towards teasing someone who's vulnerable, or someone who particularly thinking like, especially at that 10, the younger pre-adolescent age, when boys are maybe still crying about stuff, and how that is the response that often happens. Just wondering, like, how can you encourage others to resist the pressure to play into that, to make fun of crybabies or, those sorts of negative stigmas that we attach to it. How can you help to fight that pressure and help others to fight that pressure?
To fight the pressure and temptation of them committing those.
Yeah, kind of teasing or
also to get them to stop.
Yeah.
It's telling someone to stop is very hard. I know this is a bad example, but when you're young and your parents tell you stop, you keep going. So it's kind of like that in a way. I feel like if we really want to get them to stop, there should be like lectures, classes that they should be fed, because they need to see what harm they're doing, and it can be major. It can be, it can take a life. So the impact that their words and actions can have on people needs to be shown to them, and what can come from it. So I think that's how.
Thank you. And that really piggybacks my last question, which is, you sort of already alluded to it, but how can schools, specifically Logos Academy, help to fight this negative stigma? What can we as an organization do in order to fight the negative stigma?
I think the counseling that we have is good, but I guess I'll focus more on the men's perspective of it. It's an overall concern, but for men, getting more one-on-one time with men that they can, an older man who's more educated on mental health and dealt with more can give more advice and wisdom and knowledge to a younger student, and can help them to overcome these struggles. Check-ins with men and women throughout the year, seeing how their mental health is doing, especially seniors, because I know a lot of us were getting our butts kicked this year, and it was one of the toughest years for all of us. So.
Thank you. Great job.